Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll begin in about 60 seconds. Welcome, everyone. We'll begin in about 45 seconds. Welcome, everyone. We're just waiting for the last few people to pop in, and we will begin in about 25 seconds. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you're here this afternoon. My name is Kelsey Knox, and I am the archivist for special collections and university archives here at Pepperdine and Payson Library. And Pepperdine Libraries is proud to bring people together and build community. Events like this one are open to a general audience, and we're delighted to inspire learning no matter what your affiliation to Pepperdine is. Today's event is the first of our new alumni author lecture series, in which we aim to connect today's Pepperdine students and greater community with our Pepperdine alumni who have become published authors. We hope that this will inspire our students and engage our alumni while continuing to build community through our library and the services that we provide. And following today's lecture, there will be a Q&A session, so please stick around. And be sure to stay until the end, because we'll be sharing a link for you to sign up for your chance to win one of 2 autographed copies of Dr. Catherine Meeks' book, which she'll be speaking on today. So today I am absolutely delighted to introduce you all to Dr. Catherine Meeks, our speaker for this afternoon. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Dr. Meeks over the past year, and I couldn't have hoped for a better alumni to kick off this series. Dr. Catherine Meeks is a George Pepperdine College graduate of 1970. She holds a master's degree in social work from Clark Atlanta University and a PhD from Emory University. Dr. Meeks is the executive director of the Absalom Jones Center for Racial Healing in Atlanta, Georgia. A sought-after teacher and workshop leader, Catherine brings 4 decades of experience to the work of transforming the dismantling racism work in Atlanta. The core of her work has been with people who have been marginalized because of economic status, race, gender, or physical ability as they pursue liberation, justice, and access to resources that can lead them to health, wellness, and a more abundant life. This work grows out of her understanding of her call to the vocation of teacher, as well as her realization that all of humanity is one family which God desires to unite. Catherine is the retired Clara Acree Distinguished Professor of Socio-cultural Studies from Wesleyan College and the founding executive director of the Lane Center for Community Engagement and Service. She characterizes herself as a midwife to the soul of her students and workshop participants. She is the author of 6 books and 1 inspirational CD, and is the editor of the best-selling book, Living into God's Dream, Dismantling Racism in America. She is the co-author of Passionate for Justice, Ida B. Wells as Prophet for Our Times, which she will be speaking with us about today. So please join me in welcoming today's featured alumni speaker, Dr. Catherine Meeks.
Hello, Kelsey. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And more than that, thank you for being the person you are and doing the work you've been doing at Pepperdine for a good long while. It's been such a delight to get to know you and to see your passionate concern for truth telling and helping to advance the work of healing in this country. And I'm just so delighted to be here with you today. And thank you and the group for deciding to have me come and be the inaugural speaker for this series that you're doing. I'm just more delighted than I can find words to express.
Thank you. We're just so happy to have you today, and we can't wait to talk to you about your book. It's a wonderful read for anybody who has not yet picked it up. I highly encourage it. So we are hoping to talk to you a little bit about your time here at Pepperdine before moving into talking about the book. But I'm so curious, did you always know that you wanted to write? Has that been a passion of yours for your whole life?
I've been a reflective person all of my life, since I was a little girl. When I was a little girl of 8, I used to get up early in the mornings and go sit outside and watch the sun come up and listen to the birds sing and watch the world wake up and think about things. And when you're 8 years old, that's kind of a big deal to do that. I lived in Arkansas. My father was an illiterate sharecropper, and my mother was a school teacher who graduated from college the same year I graduated from high school. So that might give people a little bit of a idea of the environment in which I lived. And getting up early and going out before everything got busy was so important to me. And I think that that was a part of the development of the artist's heart, the writer's heart that I now can name. Then I couldn't name it because I was just a little kid, but it was always there. And I'm so glad now to be able to articulate from that space that was formed way back then, but got sharpened as I marched my way through my life.
Wonderful. So tell us a little bit about your time at Pepperdine. Did your classes or your professors kind of influence your writing life or your trajectory as to where you would go?
Well, it's really important for the audience to understand a little bit about who I was when I came to Pepperdine. So I was a young woman who graduated from high school in Arkansas, went to Compton Junior College for 2 years, and then came to Pepperdine to finish my degree. And I was working. I had to work because I didn't have a way to live if I didn't work. And my sister lived with me, who was had some issues, and it made my life a little complicated. So even though I was a college student, it was like I had in some ways, college was almost secondary for me because I had this other life that was taking a good bit of time and energy. I came to Pepperdine with this open heart and this inquisitive mind, and not even knowing at that time how good a mind I had because of the distractions of trying to survive. And in the midst of that, there were things that really shaped and formed the way that I have gone through life and the person that I have become. And I just want to highlight 2 of them. One was meeting Jennings Davis, Lucille Todd, and Ann King, and was the dorm head resident, head dorm mother. Even though I didn't live in the dorm, I got to know her. Jennings Davis, Dr. Jennings Davis was the Dean of Students, and Dr. Lucille Todd was the Dean of Women. Those 3 people taught me an important lesson about the possibility of loving somebody who's white. And that was a very important thing to happen for me if I were going to be able to do the work that I'm called to do now in terms of racial healing and building bridges across lines of difference. The other thing that happened was the murder of Larry Kimmons. And you, of course, know a good bit about this. I don't know how much the audience knows, so I just will say quickly, this young Black boy from the neighborhood was shot and killed by the security guard at the time on campus, and in a very horrible way. And it called me to having to become clearer about my understanding of who I was as a Black person and what my life had to be about. And it also helped me to become grounded in a sense of courage and fierceness about the necessity to stand up for people who were marginalized and being mistreated. And Larry definitely was mistreated and lost his life. And then watching the university's lack of response, lack of positive responses in that whole situation helped me to see the lay of the land in a way that I'd never seen it before in terms of systemic racism. So, and this is a lot of stuff to be twirling around in your head when you're in your 20s and have all these responsibilities, and yet you're also a student. I mean, I was working, trying to help take care of a troubled young person, and then being a little bit of a revolutionary in the whole process of taking on systems that I didn't even really understand. But just knowing somewhere intuitively that there's something called right and wrong, and that you need to figure which place you plan to stand on. And it was always clear to me that I was going to try to stand in the right place, but I had to figure that out. So I think that Larry's death and the grief that I sometimes even feel about it now, 50 something years later, galvanized for me that place inside myself that said, I'm not going to ever say yes to oppression. I'm never going to negotiate with it. I'm never going to be uh, ready to entertain it. I'm always going to be a resistor. So I see myself as a fierce resistor. And that was one of the things I learned from being there and having those experiences, and having to figure out what kind of person do I want to be? What kind of person of faith do I want to be in this world? And of course, you know, when you're in your 20s, you're still trying to figure out which end is up and what you're even doing on the planet. And so it was a rough time, but it was always clear to me that right, justice had to be figured into whatever my journey was about. And that's fueled this life now. I'm 75, and I feel more fierce about it now than I did even then. So it was quite an imprint that's never going to go away.
Absolutely. So was that part of what called you to continue your studies? You went on to get a master's and a PhD. Was that something that started formulating as you were still an undergraduate, or did you take time after you graduated to kind of enter the field and then realize that you felt you had more to learn and more to do in the classroom before you continued your career?
When I graduated from Pepperdine, I said that I never wanted to see the inside of another classroom in higher education as long as I lived. That was my basic response. It was, you know, it was a pretty long journey just getting through all of those things I've just described. And so I left Los Angeles and moved back to the South. I'd grown up in Arkansas. I kept feeling myself called back to the South, which was an amazing thing to have happened because I had declared I was never coming back to the South again. So one should be so careful about making those declarations because they don't work out too well. And I moved to Atlanta and couldn't find a job in Atlanta, and ended up finding a job in Macon, Georgia, which is 85 miles south of Atlanta. And Macon is about 50 years behind the rest of the country in its attitudes and everything. So that was another seriously deeply wounding place for me to be, because I went there working in the mental health world without really understanding that I was the only African American in a community mental health center. And I didn't realize that the white people who worked there often saw me as the mentally ill patients they were working with. And I was living through a lot of projections and things that I did not understand. And that was a really tough year for me of working in that center. And I left and moved to Memphis and worked a year in Memphis, and then moved back to Macon to work in student personnel because I wanted to be like Jennings Davis and Lucille Todd. And I was offered a job as assistant dean of women. And I took that job very excitedly and thought, oh, now I get to go and be in student affairs and do these things with students. And this is where I really want to be. And so if you really want to be in higher education, as the college president told me in Macon, you do have to get your union cards, which are graduate degrees. And so I went and got a master's in social work. And then after that, realized I still wanted to be in higher ed and that I should go get my PhD. So I went back to school again at Emory to get my PhD, but it wasn't like I was on this pathway of these are the degrees and I want to do these things. It was kind of the organic moving through my life and kind of saying yes to the next thing that led me to going back to school. And you know, it's about learning. It's really about, it's not just the union card, even though you do need the card if you want to be a professor. And so I ended up not just working in student life, but going on to direct the African American Studies program at Mercer and becoming an endowed chairholder at Wesleyan College later toward the end of my career.
Well, the end of your first career.
Yeah,
you can hardly argue that you're not working anymore. I mean, you're so influential and you're still doing so much, including writing books. So I'd love to talk to you a little bit about your newest book, Passionate for Justice, Ida B. Wells, that's Profit for Our Time. So what inspired you to write this book? And you co-wrote it with Nibs Stroupe. So how did that come about? How do you decide not only to write a book, but to write a book with a white man about such a prominent Black figure?
Well, Ida B. Wells, I think, has been accompanying me a long time. And maybe before I actually met her, the energy and the kind of spirit that she brought to the world was something that I was touching into and didn't even realize it. I taught a class on her at one juncture in my career, and my students said the strangest thing to me. I came into class one day and we started talking, and they said, well, Dr. Meeks, we want to let you know how much we think you are like Ida B. Wells. And I nearly fainted. I thought, are you kidding me? I wasn't thinking that way at all about her. And then they started making the comparisons, and in terms of my being a writer and her being a journalist, and the kind of passion and the fierceness that they felt in the way that I approached teaching and doing activism. And I was so taken by that until I had to really think through what they were saying. Because sometimes somebody says something to you and you just kind of blow it off because it just goes right over you. But I couldn't let that go. And so I started investigating her more carefully and interrogating myself in the midst of that investigation, and just realized how much the spirit and how much the journey that we traveled resembled each other. And this is not for me to take any special kind of credit here. It's humbling to even think about that I even make those comparisons, because she laid her life down for her people. So that's, if I'm going to take any kind of energy from her, then I best be ready to do that myself. So, and so I kept thinking, I want to write about her. I want to write about her. But you want to write about somebody, but it's a big project, and some of the hesitance was, well, who do you think you are? And then all these other people are writing about her anyway. So what do you have to say that hadn't been said already, or somebody else can say better? And then I met Nibs Stroupe, who grew up about 30 miles from me in Arkansas, though we never met each other until we met in Atlanta around some of the work we were doing. He is a retired Presbyterian minister, and he loved Ida B. Wells as I did, and was really interested in her. But his parishioners had told him that no white man had a right to write a book about Ida B. Wells without having somebody of African descent involved in it. So he was like me. I'm on this side kind of shaking in my shoes, and he's over here kind of shaking in his shoes. And we got together and said, let's do this. And so but it still took me nearly 2 years, because I was busy running the Center for Racial Healing and doing other stuff. And finally, I said to Nibs, I either have to do this book or quit talking about it. And so we did it. And we did it in this format of each of us, of course, writing. But what we wanted to do more than anything was to talk about Ida B. Wells and her work, and how she is indeed a prophet for all times, I think, in terms of being a person who is listening to what the calls are upon her life and saying yes to them. From the first time when she said yes, when her parents died in the yellow fever epidemic, and left her and her sisters and brothers, and people were trying to divide them up and put them in different places. And she said, absolutely not. She took on the care of her sisters and brothers, and she was 16 years old. So what 16-year-old has got the courage to say, I can raise my sisters and brothers? And it was like 4 or 5 of them. So, and then when she sued the railroad station because they threw her off the train, she was still young. She was still very young. And yet she did these things. And then she stood up against lynching like nobody else in this country has ever done before her, or since, actually. And so here was this woman that we knew we needed to talk about, but we also wanted to model that a Black person and a white person can talk about race and tell the truth and still be friends afterwards. And so that we have this section in the book that's a conversation between Nibs and me about things that we disagree about. And, for the classic one is, he he was trying to tell me that Thomas Jefferson had some redeemable qualities, and I said, don't give me that, you know. And so I mean, it's, and we laugh about that now, that, you know, and he said at one point that Ida B. Wells didn't win many battles, and I said, what are you talking about? The fact that she didn't just drop dead in the street was the most important battle that she won. So we were able to have these kind of back and forth conversations and disagree, and then come away from it being willing to look at the other person's opinion a little bit more, you know. And now we kind of laugh about it. I said, you know, I'm trying to see if I'm going to give Jefferson any credit, you know, and my mind's not made up yet about that. But nonetheless, we feel that we accomplished that. We were able to do this book and tell and have these conversations in a way that models that you can have honest conversations across lines of race and be respectful and disagree with each other and still be friends afterwards. And so it's been a wonderful exercise for us, and we go around and talk about the book together and all of that, and we you know, we like each other, and that's a good thing. So she is an amazing woman. I have a photograph of her on my wall in my bedroom and here beside my computer. And my son gave me a painting of her for my birthday. And I have a picture of her on my wall at the center. So almost everywhere I look, there's Ida B. Wells. In actuality, in terms of her photographs in my house and in my office, but more than that, she's in my head and in my heart. And she is a real human being. You know, that's the other thing I want to say quickly. Not somebody to be put way up on a pedestal so that she's so high up until you don't ever have to be like her. No, she's a real human being down here struggling. If you read her Memphis Diary, she talks about not being able to pay her bills sometimes because she loved to shop, and she would spend more than she had any business spending. And then she didn't have the money she needed for other things. So she's struggling with managing money. She couldn't find boys who really liked her because she was too smart and too far ahead of them. I identify with all of that. Not so much the shopping. I mean, I like to shop, but I didn't get in as much financial trouble as she did. But that was always true, that I was smarter than all the boys in my room, and sometimes smarter than all of them put together. And they didn't like me. And it used to bother me, but you know, now I get what it was about. So it doesn't bother me at all. But she had that problem, and she's writing in her diary about, you know, how ridiculous they are, because they really should be liking her because she's this wonderful person. So here's this real human being with the struggles of any other human being, but who steps up to the plate to the extent that all these years later, here we are talking about her. And I've written this book about her, and she just won the posthumous Pulitzer Prize for her journalism because of the way she said yes to the invitations that were presented to her to stand up in the world, to be a force of light and healing rather than taking an easy path. So I love the woman so much, and I'll never be done with her. I will be talking about her and thinking about her and thinking of other ways to engage with her until I die.
It's wonderful. Going back to talking a little bit more about how you are able to talk to Nibs about things that you disagree on, you know, that is something that obviously is, as a society, we're really facing right now. And I think particularly a lot of students are trying to figure out how to navigate that within their own lives and in their academic lives. Is there any advice that you could offer, or starting points that you could point to help students through these difficult conversations that they're having in their classrooms or with their friends?
I think the most important thing to do is to have a clear sense of what you really do believe. Because when somebody starts challenging you, what makes you nervous a lot of the time is that you're not totally sold on the idea inside your own heart. So I think if you have a clear understanding of what you believe and why you believe it, then you don't have to be scared that anybody who challenges that or doesn't believe what you believe is going to somehow do something to you. because it's fear that makes us want to hide out. These are my thoughts and feelings, and this is how I see the world. And when you come in with another way to see the world, then I feel challenged and I don't know what to do with that. And then I get uneasy, and then I want to argue because I got to restore my sense of self. If you have to work on your sense of self, so that Howard Thurman, who's another one of my mentors, says that if you don't get clear about your own self, that you will be blown by every wind that comes by. So you'll be, you just like this in the wind because you don't know where you stand. But if you really know where you stand, you can be standing there when you get through with somebody challenging you, if it's really your place. And if you don't really stand there, it might be a good idea to find that out and try to figure out where you do stand. So I think that my best advice to young people is to be curious and to be careful to know what's in your heart, to know what you think, and not to be just spouting off something somebody told you. Just because your grandmother thinks it or your daddy thinks it, it may not be what you think. And it doesn't mean that if you think something differently, that they're somehow bad people, because that's a part of why we hold on to our prejudices. We can't allow ourselves to disagree with our family, because maybe if we needed to get rid of that prejudice, we might have to get rid of them too. And you can't get rid of your family because they're your family. No, you can disagree with them and you still love them, and they're still just who they were. You just got down the road a little further than they got. And now you see a little more light than they have. And that's a good thing. And so I think that if you can work on this internal stuff, that there won't have to be so much fear. I think fear is at the bottom of all of what's happening in our country at the moment. People are afraid. Two things: people are afraid, and people don't have enough courage. There's a deficit of courage in America everywhere right now, and especially in religious communities. And we need to be on our knees asking God to give us some more courage.
Absolutely. And I think that courage is certainly not something that Ida lacked at all.
No.
Story after story, it's so wonderful to learn more about her through the book, but also just to learn about your journey and Nibs's journey. And it was really fascinating. How do you think that current events have affected your perception of Ida's influence? Do you see her influencing the next generation? Kind of where do you think her place in current history is?
I think that her granddaughter, Michelle Duster, has written a lovely book called Ida B, the Queen. And it's sort of geared at the younger generation. And it's lovely. I would want to invite people to get it, because it really is, it's a great book. And it really does help to bring her to a generation that may not be quite ready to get deeply into her as Nibs and I have gotten into her this way. But it's a lovely way to connect her to things that are happening in the 21st century as well, because she includes a lot of those things in Ida B, the Queen. So, and Michelle is a wonderful soul. So it's her great granddaughter who wrote the foreword to our book. And I've had the wonderful opportunity of working with her some, and just find her delightful. I think that Ida B's way of being, the courageousness, the clarity of the clarity of mission, the understanding that liberation is what everybody deserves to have, and to be fierce in holding on to that and working for that, and to be ready to actually lay your life down for that. So I think that that young people in the 21st century will need to interrogate themselves about what matters to them. And Ida B is somebody that can be a good guide in that interrogation process, because until you find out, Dr. King said, until you find out what you are willing to die for, you don't have a whole lot to live for. And so, you gotta be living for something more than just buying the next car, or getting the next new cell phone, or having a new title, or all that stuff that the culture has told us is the essence of being important and okay, which really doesn't matter. So I want to encourage people to dig into life and find out the things that matter that you will take to the grave with you. The things that matter, the ways in which people have interacted with you, the ways in which you have treated people, finding out what's at the core of yourself. Ida B. Wells is a great role model for that work and for that journey, and will always be. And current events just make me more convinced of this, because what we have is what I just said, fear and a deficit of courage that's coupled with this materialism that's ruining us all. You know, if I can just get one more trinket or one more gadget, my life is going to be okay, because that's what we have been told. The truth is, you're not going to be okay, because if you don't get some clarity about what's in your heart, you're never going to be okay. And Ida B, you know, to stand up at 16 and say, I'll take care of these kids. You will not separate me and my sisters and brothers because my parents would turn over in their grave. To have that kind of understanding of what you are called to do, we could use some more of that in the younger generation. We could use it in the older generation too. This is not to beat up the younger generation, because we got some old folks that don't know how to do this either. But I think that young people need to kind of sit on a few rocks and contemplate what matters to them, and not just let themselves be told what's supposed to matter, but to really see, you know, are these my questions? Are these my answers? Are these the things that I care about? Is this where I want to put my energy? Do I want to live my life like this? Or am I just doing it because it's the only way that somebody told me you're supposed to live? And were they telling me the only truth there is to find? Or can I find some bigger truth? Like, can I enlarge this truth that I got out of my house with? So, and I want to, while I'm saying this, because I used to be a professor, and I'm always thinking about young people because I love teaching. You've just got to find your way. I mean, you have got to figure out what belongs to you. What are your dreams? What are your questions? What are your answers? What are your hopes? And they may be laced with your family narrative, but they cannot just be that. You've got to find your own stuff. And if you don't do it, you'll spend your life, as Thurman said, being blown by every wind that comes by. So this generation is no different from any generation that's gone before. People need to do this work, and Ida B. Wells is a great model, and will be as time continues, I think.
Wonderful, thank you. You are full of advice for our young people and our college students today. Can you offer some advice in terms of writing? You know, how should college students who are interested in writing and in publishing, how can they kind of take that to the next level? How can they follow that passion? What have you found to be important in your writing career?
Well, I think the first thing is that you should be writing because you have to. You should be writing because it won't leave you alone. If you think you're going to write the best-selling novel or whatever, you're probably never going to do it. But if you're writing because there's something in you that just won't let you not write, and you keep having these ideas, you keep being pushed in that direction, you keep having that passion, and nothing will settle it but writing, then you best go and write. You know, I listen to people say, well, I'm going to start when I get a desk. And I think, no, you're not. You're not going to start, because if you've got to write, if you'll get yourself a pen and a paper sack and you'll sit on a rock and you'll write, because I kept a journal. I have kept a journal for, oh my Lord, maybe 45 years. I've got so many journals around, and my kids are saying, find out what you want to do with those journals, because we don't want to have to dispense with them when you're gone, figure it out, because I've got them everywhere, because I had to write. And having to write is not about having to be published. If you get to be published, that's a gift. You should write because you can't help it. And then if you can get published, you get published, but you have got something to say. And I wrote in a journal for a long, long time before I was published, because I had to write. And then somebody says, donate my journals to Pepperdine Special Collections. I don't know, we might want to talk about that.
We always can.
Yeah. So, but I think that you listen to your heart, and then you see what you have the courage to put out for the world to hear and see that is coming out of your heart. And the more you get to know yourself and the what's there that you want to share, it's a great way to share ideas. It's a great way to have your ideas be left around when you leave this life. So there are lots of things I think that probably propel writers forward. But I think the thing that's propelled me the most was the necessity, my soul's necessity for me to bear witness to my journey. So is your writing somehow bearing witness to truth that you have come to understand? Then you want to share that truth, but it's also bearing witness for you. So you write for yourself and other people get to enjoy it. And if that's not what's happening, then you might have to go back to the drawing board and say, why is this really what I want to do? Or did somebody tell me I should be a writer because I like to read? People say all kinds of things to you, and you have to be careful not to let what they say become what you do unless your heart is in agreement with it.
So does this mean you never get writer's block? Do you always have this urge to write? Or do you run into when you're trying to write like on a specific topic, like this book, do you ever kind of hit that wall and question whether you should be writing it or how to get around it?
Well, I told you in the beginning, I said to myself, who do you think you are to talk about Ida B. Wells? But I think writer's block is really about not knowing what you want to say or being willing to say what you think you need to say. I have come across both of those things in myself, that here's an idea, but I don't quite know yet how to talk about it. Or here's an idea, and I don't know if I've got the courage to say what I think needs to be said. So that's kind of, I just leave that alone when I'm in that space where I clearly don't know what to say. I just don't try to say it, because if it's mine to say, it will get clear to me how to say it, and I'll do it. And that's my approach. And so, and here's the book, the proof that for a while I didn't know how to say what I wanted to say. And then it came, and here's the book. There's some stuff that I'm getting ready to work on that has to do with race. It's taken me a good long while. It's not that I don't know what to say, it's that I didn't have the courage to say it, and I do now. So it's going to be time to write about racial healing in some ways that I've never written about it before. So yeah, it's a dance like everything else, and you kind of dance in and then you dance out, and then you sit for a while and say, well, the dance floor just won't let me alone, so I got to get back out there and try it again. So it's a good thing. It's a good process.
That's wonderful. So so you're kind of teasing another book. Any timeline, any thoughts? Now I'm curious. You've piqued my curiosity.
Well, my publisher likes me, so they're kind of saying, yeah, we want you to, whatever you want, we want you to write something else. But I think I'm going to take up the topic of internalized depression in the African American community, looking at it through the Jungian lens and lens of faith that I tend to look through, because I believe there's some things that I can say about that I need to say. And I think I have now come to the point of clarity about that and courage about it. So it's going to happen, or else I'm going to be a pretty miserable human being. And I don't know, I don't have a timeline, because I'm running this Center for Racial Healing, and I can't do all of it at once. And so it's some things will have to, sit on the back burner for a minute, but it's there and it will happen.
Oh, good. Well, we can't wait. And I speak for more than just myself, because I know that there are a number of other people who were probably also very interested to hear that. So thank you so much for this conversation, for all of your input and all of your advice for our students. It has really been wonderful. And we'd love to open the floor up for a little bit of Q&A while we still have you here.
Yes.
So if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat. and I'm going to try and go through this. There's a lot of comments about how much people are enjoying what you had to say, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I saw somebody mentioning the Elaine Massacre that happened with the sharecroppers being murdered in Elaine, Arkansas, which was right down the road from me, but I never heard of it until I was a long time after I had left Arkansas. One of those things that happened kind of related to the whole issue of Red Summer in this country when so many African Americans were massacred across the land as Black people started to gain a little prominence, and white people who were frightened to death about that started to um, want to put us back in our place. So that massacre was a part of that. So
It's fascinating. Someone wants to know, what books are you reading? So curious what authors you admire.
Well, there are a bunch of them, but let me say right at the present moment, the person that's at the top of my head is the playwright August Wilson, who died not so long ago. His plays are calling my name to do something in terms of my writing about racial healing and teaching about that. And so I'm watching the plays and thinking about them and watching the documentary about his life, and he's just at the kind of the top of the heap for me. And then Parker Palmer's it's an old book. It's called the Promise of Paradox, dealing with the contradictions in the Christian life. And I feel like that life is a whole collection of contradictions and paradoxes, and that you have to be willing to embrace them. You don't get to throw one part away because it's difficult. That's why fundamentalism is a refusal to acknowledge paradox. And so I would recommend that you read the Promise of Paradox by Parker Palmer, because I just love that book so much. And then Zora Neale Hurston, Their Eyes Were Watching God. I've read it so many times. Their Eyes Were Watching God so many times. I pretty much know. I could recite it probably, but I'm like a little kid with that book. I would just want to read it because even though I know exactly what's going to happen next, I still want to see it. And the language is so beautiful in it. And Hurston is such a wonderful writer. So anyway, that's the Hurston, Palmer, and August Wilson right now. And Howard Thurman, Howard Thurman is like oxygen for me. So I just want to invite you to go Google him and look into his writings, because he is a phenomenal theologian that everybody needs to know. And people should investigate Ida B. Wells more, not just with mine and Nibs's book, but with all of the the books she wrote herself, and then other books that were written by her.
Wonderful. So we have a question here. I'm curious if Dr. Meeks is aware of the BlackPepperdine Instagram account and what words of wisdom she would have for our Black students fighting for greater inclusivity still today, and also how those of us in the faculty and administration can do better.
Well, I want to say that two things. Brave spaces need to be created where people can tell the truth, and tell the best truth you can tell every time you open your mouth. And don't speak unless you intend to tell the truth. If you're sitting trying to figure out how to fix the truth so it won't disturb somebody, then it's probably better to stay quiet. So I would encourage people to be willing to stand up and tell the truth. And I see Michelle Miller here, and I want to say hello, Michelle. And Michelle is the daughter of the person that I worked for when I was at Pepperdine, when I was a Pepperdine student, Dr. Ross Miller, who was somebody who helped me to be this person as well, that I have become, who was an amazing inspiration and helper and supporter in my life at a time when, had he not been there, I don't know what would have happened, because he just was such an amazing supporter. So anyway, I telling the truth and creating brave space, and remove the word safe space from your vocabulary. We do not need to be so concerned about safe spaces as we need to be concerned about brave spaces. Because when we start talking about safe spaces, we're trying to see how we can lie, how we can not tell the truth. So that, because we want everybody to like us. We claim we want everybody to feel okay, but we mostly want to protect our own egos. You know, it's not that if you feel kind of bad, that's okay, but I don't want to feel worse than you. So let's get over it. And let's say being well is more important than everybody always feeling good about everything. And sometimes the truth makes you not feel too good until you settle it into yourself. And it's like exercise. I mean, you don't feel so good when you're doing it, but you really feel good after you've done it. And when you tell the truth, sometimes it doesn't always feel good, but it feels good. The results feels good because ultimately healing occurs. And so for the African American students at Pepperdine, I don't know exactly what your lives are like now, but you're in Malibu, for God's sake. And there are not a whole lot of you there. I can count on that fact. And so how do you navigate that space with integrity? And I don't know what your hardships are or challenges or whatever, but look for allies and look for people who help you, who are affirming to you, and who will help you to be brave and help you to be committed to telling the truth and staying clear about your integrity being the most important thing you have. Make sure about that because it'll get you on down the road way further than all the superficial stuff.
Thank you. That's excellent advice. Another question, where do you believe that courage comes from? Is it dynamic and ever changing, or is it you either have it or you don't sort of thing?
I don't believe that anybody's got a corner on the market. I think that I think courage comes from really getting to know who you are and what you stand for and what you're willing to live and die for. And so then whatever it takes to achieve those things, it's not like I don't wake up in the morning saying, let me just be courageous. I wake up in the morning saying, I resist the oppression. I resist denigration. I resist marginalization. I resist anybody not being treated the way they need to be treated. And it takes courage to stay faithful to that commitment to be a resistor. So courage is a byproduct of clarity about what you stand for and what you're willing to die for. And that's the bottom line. What am I willing to die for? Because that death is the thing that keeps us held down by fear. I mean, the biggest fear we have is we'll die. Okay, we all will. So now we got that out of the way. What am I going to do to live? And living without courage to me is the same as dying. And Dr. King says that if you have an opportunity to stand up and be a courageous person at 25 and you don't do it, that you might live to be 90, but it's a belated announcement of an earlier death back here when you said no to the opportunity to be this courageous person because you end up living your life as a coward and you kill off a part of yourself. So courage, you can't manufacture it and nobody can give it to you. Courage comes because there's something you care about enough to be willing to die for it. And we mostly aren't being asked to die. Nobody's necessarily trying to kill me. At least I don't think so. But, and if they are, and I'll live till they catch up with me. But the thing of it is, the ego is always looking out for itself and saying, you don't want to do that because you might not get promoted, or you might not get the scholarship, or you might not get the interview, or, well, integrity says, I have to tell you this. And if I have to not get this, I mean, I remember during the whole thing with Larry Kimmons, how we African-American students said, you're going to take our scholarships because we're standing against the administration and we don't care. If they'd taken our scholarships, we didn't have any money to pay for school, but standing up for what we believed was more important to us. And we were ready to suffer that death because that would have been a kind of death. So, yeah.
What a powerful answer. Another question, what does mentorship mean to you, and who was your greatest mentor or sponsor? And then also, how have you kind of paid mentorship forward like Ida B. Wells would have?
Well, I am fiercely committed to anybody who's courageous enough to be on their journey and asking questions and turning over rocks and looking for the truth. I don't care who you are. I don't care how old you are. I don't care if you're black, white, green, or yellow. I am fiercely committed to that and will go many extra miles to help a person do that work. And my mother was somebody who didn't talk a lot about all this stuff, didn't even know some of the stuff that I'm talking about, but taught me to get up every day and keep on going forward, to get up every day with a purpose. And she would say, tomorrow's another day, even when bad things were happening. And she also taught me what I call the definition of tenacity, that when you get to the end of your rope, you tie a knot in it and you hang on. So, and I don't like people to make excuses to me because of my mother could always find a way to solve a problem. And so when my people who work with me know this, they best not tell me how we can't do something. They just need to tell me what we have to do in order to do it. Because it's, when you start talking about what you can't do, it's because it's going to be hard and you're trying to get out of it. But that's beside the point. You can do it if you're willing to do what it takes. So I learned that from my mother, and I learned something from my father as a sharecropper, to take a chance, to be courageous, because farming is a risky business. You can do this work and have the crop be gone in a heartbeat. So my parents, often in kind of odd ways, taught me a lot. And it took me some years to walk myself back through my life and see what they taught me. Because when you're young, you're kind of foolish about your parents. You don't quite get who they are. You don't like them part of the time. And then you get over that foolishness. And then I've already mentioned Dr. Miller was a mentor in so many ways, opened up my head about politics and racial consciousness in so many ways. And then Howard Thurman, and just I've been reading Howard Thurman since I was in my 30s, so for 40 years now, and I don't find him boring. I still haven't read all of his stuff because he wrote 26 books in his life. So Howard Thurman, and I have rheumatoid arthritis, and rheumatoid arthritis has been a great teacher. It's taught me many things, and my limitations. It's taught me to embrace what is. It's taught me to make allowances and to be flexible and to take care of myself, and taught me that I cannot do everything. And so it's been a great teacher, and I am committed to mentorship. I mean, you ask anybody who knows me, and they will tell you she is always encouraging. You come to me and say, I want to try to sprout wings and grow them so I can see if I can fly. And I will sit down with you and we'll talk about that. I will not tell you that it's really a silly idea. It probably is going to be a silly idea. But if you keep on working at it, you'll come to that conclusion. And I don't need to help you. I don't need to help you lose your willingness to dream about what you can be. And I think the best mentors are folks who help us to dream bigger, maybe sometimes than we can actually achieve. But Zora Neale Hurston's mom said something that I really love, that you should jump at the sun. You should always jump at the sun, because even if you only hit a star, you'll at least be off the ground. And I love that idea that, you're not hanging back and scared to death. You're trying. And that's a good thing. And people got good sense. Eventually, reality will catch up with you. I don't need to have to always be trying to pull somebody down and sit them down in reality. Reality will catch up with you. What people need is support and somebody who will dream with them and who will help them. And we do need to help each other way more than we do. We need to quit being competitors all the time and learn that the universe is really abundant. God is bigger than our poor little scarcity way of looking at the world. And so so I sit here with my whatever I've got, and it just multiplies because I go and give stuff out and other people can enjoy then the abundance of God, and then it just grows and it just makes it all bigger. So we end up, it's like that stone soup recipe. Everybody keeps bringing their stuff, and before you know it, you got this great big pot of wonderful soup, as opposed to somebody sitting with their one little stone saying, I gotta sit here and protect this because it's only one stone left on the earth. And well, maybe there's not just one stone left on the earth. Maybe there's many stones left on the earth. And if you opened up your kitchen, some folks might come in and help you build a bigger pot of stew. So I'm totally into, let's cut out the competition when it comes to trying to get through life and live the best life we can live. And I'm not going to participate in that. I never have. And I'm not about to start now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Catherine, for your time with us. Thank you on behalf of the libraries and on behalf of Pepperdine and George Pepperdine College. There's just word after word. Everybody is hanging on every word that you say, and just there's so much thankfulness in the comments. So
will you send me the chat? Can you send me the chat?
Yes, I think Jeff can get it for you. And so for everybody else, I think Jeff was going to drop a link in the chat on how to fill out the survey so you can win one of 2 copies of Catherine's book, which she has graciously agreed to autograph and send your way. And we thank her for that as well. So thank you again. For everybody interested in our library events, you can check out our forthcoming events on our website. Dr. Paul Contino is going to be speaking, I believe, on May 5th, if that's correct, Jeff, on his new book. And we try and keep the events coming and the lectures coming and hope that everybody can find a little bit of something that they're interested. But once again, Catherine, thank you so much for your time. This has been just a wonderful afternoon, and we really appreciate it.
Well, Kelsey, the gratitude is, I appreciate your thanking me, but my heart is so warmed by having had this opportunity and to be with you. And thank you for the lovely questions that have just let me think about all of this in this way. And it was just such a delight to be with you and to be with this audience. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. So thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Take good care.